Hi, and welcome to the Grove Podcast. I'm Matt Battiali, your host. In these episodes, we try and bring you companies and people and discussions that we at Mangrove Investor feel are important. These are the parts of the business world that maybe you don't see every day. So we try and highlight nonprofits, private companies, and even some public companies, and show you the good that they're doing. So sit back and enjoy this episode, and thanks very much for listening. So this is the second half of my interview with Joy Huntington, the founder and CEO of Uqaqti Consulting. As I said in the last one, I think she's great. She speaks for rural Alaskan communities. She advocates for them with the industries that want to come and work in rural Alaska. She keeps their needs first and foremost in her mind as she's talking to these companies. I just think she's fantastic. So I hope you enjoy this second half, and feel free to send me email and let me know, if you want to hear her again, or if there's any actually guests you want to hear again, let me know. But I hope you enjoy this. Thanks very much for listening. It's a great example because, the company thought they were doing a really good thing. And it was just that little gap of, well, we don't have enough high school graduates to take advantage of your opportunity. And so then without you stepping in there, that could have been a big missed opportunity. So that's a great example.
Yes, absolutely. And imagine the depth of those relationships moving forward from that point.
Yeah, it's completely different.
When they saw the project pivot and reevaluate what the best approach was going to be based on input from them, and come back with something that they were really excited about, the trust and conversation and relationship was entirely different from that point forward.
Yeah, it's tremendous. And you mentioned Heliostar earlier, and I think this is another example where their Unga project, which is on Unga Island, there are a lot of major companies had looked at that. I spoke with a couple of geos who went and looked at this project in the past, and the barrier to that project was the fact that there were multiple, I think is it tribes that own the surface rights, or multiple corporations that own surface rights, and they could never get them on side all at the same time. And you've been been a big part of getting access to that. Is that right?
Well, so the layout or the landscape is that there are village corporations that own surface estate, and then regional corporations that own both surface and subsurface estate. And those corporations were formed through the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act of 1971. So we're at the 50-year anniversary of ANCSA passing, which is very exciting. And that federal law completely made Alaska a unique situation where we don't have reservations with land held in trust by the federal government. We own our land outright as corporate entities. And so, it's including the subsurface. And so that's really been the vehicle for Alaska Native communities to become, economic powerhouses in our state through developing their land and resources across, in different areas. Obviously, some have been more successful than others. But there's a pretty major incentive as the private landowner and with the subsurface estate that can be very advantageous for communities and the corporations support. Of course, they provide a lot of employment to the shareholders, but also, educational support opportunities as well, like scholarships and things like that. So they're definitely an anchor in each of our 12 regions. There's a regional corporation, and then each village has its own village corporation. And so those are the landowners on the Unga project. And honestly, Heliostar, this isn't really, this is probably not something I should be saying if I'm promoting my business. But Heliostar was actually doing a great job with the corporations before I got here.
Oh, is that right? Oh, that's excellent.
They were, they were already really ahead of the game and had already secured agreements with each of the three corporations before I got on the project. So on that front, I'm certainly helping with that more now, and kind of hoping to really focus my energy on hiring shareholders from the Unga and Shumagan corporations. And that hiring and workforce development tied in with education and training opportunities is critical to any project success. And just like the GED program, like it requires, honestly requires someone, dedicating a lot of time and energy to finding out what the barriers are, because there's whatever you're doing in rural Alaska, there's going to be a few barriers. I'll tell you that. Whether it's the weather or whether it's getting people to apply for jobs, internet connection, just cultural differences, there's going to be barriers. And just like we approach, any economic investments, any geological challenges, we really have to invest time and energy into figuring out what those barriers are and finding ways to overcome them. And, that's definitely something I want to continue supporting Heliostar on, with all of their relationships in the community and in the region. But yeah, they were already off to a pretty good start before they hired me.
Well, I know that was one of the vital pieces, was making sure that they could get everybody to the table and have a group agreement, and they're doing something that I found to be really interesting as well. You and I talked about it on site when we were up there, and that is, Unga was the site of the first underground gold mine in Alaska. So it's been a brownfield site since the 1800s. And so there are generations and generations and generations of debris, because the groups that came to explore and to exploit the minerals there brought material over, but it's expensive to bring. A lot of that stuff from the original mine was shipped up from San Francisco. So when they were done, they left it there. And one of the things that Heliostar is doing in support of this land that belongs to these corporations is that they're removing the footprints of past exploration and exploitation projects. And I think that to me is a really a tremendous thing for them to do. And I know that the community is supporting it.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And again, that's just this company doing a really good job and being mindful of, the importance of being a great neighbor, in, thinking about the bigger picture and how to, leave a good footprint, and that's so evident. And from my first conversations with Heliostar's leadership, it was so evident that they wanted to, really leave positive impacts and, do things right out of the gate. And, with their reclamation efforts this summer, it definitely helps to reintroduce mining and mining companies to communities in a really significant way, because we have to make this reintroduction. This is mining today. These are mining executives today and how they operate. And this isn't our great-grandfather's mining industry anymore, or even our grandfather's mining industry. And in my case, not even my father's mining industry.
Right.
This is really, but this industry has changed completely as far as the projects that I've seen. And of course, there's always going to be exceptions. But overall, the standard and the bar has been raised so high for working closely with communities and building strong, mutually beneficial relationships and having that two-way communication. So Heliostar definitely is, with the work they did this summer, they showed that they were willing to go the extra mile and to go out of their way to do something good for the land and something good for, for the landowners and the community, and just, that to me is everything. If you're willing to show up and be consistent and, have open dialogue with communities, and also go the extra mile when you can, to make a positive difference, then I think you're going to have really solid relationships throughout the life of the project.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, to me, when we talk about that, the kind of the old mining versus the new mining, there's such a higher level of accountability today, particularly when you're working in a place like Alaska where, there is social media, there is internet, you are going to be held accountable today, not in 10 or 15 years for your practices and what you're doing. And so there's a much higher visibility. And rather than fight it, the companies that are on the right side of this, that are out there embracing it, I think are the ones that are going to be successful. Do you have another example you can give us about kind of a success story?
Yes, absolutely. And it's I've got a couple of examples, but one that is kind of a little bit of a no-brainer, maybe, but something that I think gets overlooked quite a bit in, working in the community relations, stakeholder engagement arena. And, it's on the one project that I mentioned, the Ambler Mining District Industrial Access Project.
Mm-hmm.
We were off to a decent start, but people definitely, hadn't really warmed up at all to this project. I mean, they were attending meetings and, really, concerned about the potential negative impacts of the proposed road. And I felt like we weren't quite making the headway that we needed to make. And a couple of things that we were doing, which did start to turn the tide a little bit, was when we would come out to the villages, we would bring bios on all of the team members that were there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of helped to build some familiarity with the people that were involved in the project. And I think that's really critical. At times it may feel like, you're there for the project, for the company. You as a person, are just a part of this team. And, I think sometimes we don't want to seem like we're just being self-promoting by focusing on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But what's missing, it's difficult to build relationships if you're not showing up as a person and as a human to these meetings and these events. And so by adding a little bit of personal details in the bios that we were providing, and we've been doing that for Heliostar as well,
Mm-hmm.
when you show up as a person, then that's where, that's kind of ground zero of a relationship, because you can start to get to know, the leaders, and they will bring themselves as well to the table. But if we're all just kind of standing behind our company name or our entity name, then that's going to really limit our opportunity to grow like deep relationships with people.
Mm-hmm.
And so the bios kind of started to open that door a little bit more for that person to person interaction. But another thing that we did was we decided, the project manager from the state entity that was involved, and the project manager with the engineering firm, and myself, we decided to just fly out to the villages and have informal conversations with people. And that is something that I don't think we do enough in the industry,
Mm-hmm.
is just, and have your leadership there. And I think that's a really critical piece, is when you bring your leadership to the table to interact with the leadership of the village, then that's a whole different tone, and they can see that the company is really dedicated to that relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and that they really mean what they say. And that's always the question. Do people really mean what they say? Are they really going to put their money where their mouths are over the long run?
Mm-hmm.
When they say we're going to do this right, can we trust them? Or is the risk too great and we don't have that any reasons to really put our faith in these people? And so when the leadership of the project show up, whether it's the vice president or the CEO, or on one project, we had the executive chairman of the board that would go to every meeting. He'd fly up from Vancouver and show up at every community meeting. Whether, honestly, one time we had to go by snow machine from one village to the other. We had to go by boat one time when the weather doesn't cooperate. And the executive chairman of the board would just roll with the punches and be at every community meeting and even sleep in the school when we were going to overnight in the village on like a library room floor. Like it wasn't glamorous, but he would show up. And that was a major game changer.
He must have been a geologist. There's no way you're going to get an accountant to do that.
I don't recall. I don't think he was a geologist. No. But yeah, no, exactly. I mean, you're definitely right though. But so back to the like informal conversations though. So when you bring your leadership out and there's no agenda on the table, there's no formal meeting. We're not asking for anything from you. We have no PowerPoint. It's just us here wanting to talk to you on a more informal basis. And those visits were so amazing because we would just walk around and kind of get an impromptu tour from somebody. We'd make sure the leadership was going to be in town. People would invite us into their homes and make a pot of moose soup for us. It was just such an enriching time for both the project leadership and the communities. And it almost wasn't even, it was kind of focused on the project, but it was very much more focused on just getting to know each other. And so that's an example of something that I saw kind of a shift in, the temperature at that point, because people start to feel more comfortable with, the leaders that are making decisions on this project. So those are a few examples. And I guess, I think bringing the rural leadership together and having them talk to each other is really important as well. And I have other examples of that, but I also feel like I'm talking a lot right now. So.
Well, that was the point, right? You have the information, and I think this is tremendous. I really do. I see the value. I see the value for both sides because as a part of the company leadership, when you go to the communities where you're going to have an impact, and you humanize the community. You see the people, you see the kids, you see the schools and the libraries, you meet the principals, and you understand that these are people whose lives you're going to impact positively or negatively. And it matters.
Absolutely.
How you do business matters because there's an
Absolutely.
It's very impersonal when you're in a boardroom in Vancouver or in Toronto or in Manhattan, and you're talking about these projects. You don't think about that family who, if you've never met the family and haven't shared moose soup with them, you don't know them. Where when you go and you do know them and you've shared food and looked them in the eye and slept on the floor of their library, you know them, and it matters now. And it gives you and from the community side, I absolutely hear what you're saying about how valuable that is to have because there's a level of accountability when you have a name and a face and a phone number, and when there's a problem, you can call them and say, there's a problem. We need, instead of it just being some 800 number to a secretary in downtown Vancouver, and you get no one and you get nowhere. That's got to be frustrating. So.
Yes, absolutely. And, Alaska is especially, a place where, that person-to-person respect is so important. And leadership is really important as well in Alaska Native communities. We really pride ourselves in, the role of tribal leaders and even our corporation leaders. And, to see them respected enough to where they're sitting down with the CEO of the company or the vice president or whoever is kind of the I mean, I know it's hard to sometimes get the CEO to visit the village. I mean, at least a few times would make a huge difference. But I think that really does change, the whole dynamic. And it's, because, and that's, I mean, I've seen the difference between meetings where, and I think it just almost makes the communities more frustrated that they're not able to talk to the leadership, the people that really make the decisions at the end of the day. And so, the having the community meeting and sharing the slides when this is a very emotional subject for them, and something that is, to the communities, these honestly are to them like life and death conversations. That's how tied we are to our environment and to our hunting and fishing, and to our culture that has already been eroded so much by just so many different factors, whether it's churches or the school system kind of forcing itself on our kids and my grandmother's generation. And I mean, there's been so many things that have eroded our identity and our way of life that, if this project is not going to, any project, but if these projects aren't going to contribute to our way of life and they're going to potentially endanger our way of life, then this is to them a life and death conversation, honestly. And to have your leadership there will be a whole different experience than having your PR person and your, project manager there. That's not going to be enough.
That makes sense. That makes sense completely. It's a acknowledgement of respect, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, to me that if I'm a potential investor, I want to see the CEO. I want to hear him speak. I want to understand their commitment to a project. And certainly then if I'm part of this community where this project wants to be located, I would expect to see the CEO come and explain to me the benefits to my community in exchange for the inconvenience or even the damage to the environment that's going to happen. So I totally get that. All right, so we have to circle back around, Joy, because I don't believe you ever gave us the story of your name.
Okay, awesome. So I like this story too. So I started the business in 2011 as let's scratch that. I started the business in 2011 as Huntington Consulting, and that's my last name, of course. And it didn't really convey who I am as a person and the work that I do. And at the time, I was starting it as a state lobbyist. And so, as you know, the company evolved over the years to include really a main focus on community relationships and stakeholder engagement. But at the time, that was just a name that I came up with just to kind of get the business off the ground, and thinking I'd have one contract and then get a quote real job at some point 10 years ago. But of course the business started to grow, and I, got on the project that I talked about. And also I'd done a little bit of work in other parts of the state in my career at that point, but not a lot. And I had never been, so in Alaska, we actually have several different distinct cultural groups. I'm Koyukon Athabaskan from the interior. And then, of course, there's coastal Yupik Eskimo groups and Inupiat Eskimo groups towards the northwest and northern parts of the state. And where the Unga project is, it's mostly Aleut. And then in the southeast, there's Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian. There's groups throughout Alaska, Alutiiq around the Kodiak Island area, and Athabascans all the way down through south central I hope I didn't miss anybody, but that's kind of the general layout of the state.
Mm-hmm.
And so through the kind of high profile, controversial, Ambler Mining District Industrial Access project that I joined, I had my first trip up to Kotzebue, which is one of the hubs of the state, one of the smaller regional hubs, and it's an Inupiaq community of about 3,000 people. And again, this is a project that not everybody was excited about. There was some pretty strong pushback from several of the different communities
mm-hmm.
near the project. And this was about maybe the third year of my business, and we were flying to Kotzebue with a few of the project managers from the engineering firm, and then the state development corporation that was actually the kind of it is the proponent of the project. But we were flying in, and I'd never been to an Inupiaq community before, and I'm supposed to be like the cultural liaison, right? I'm supposed
mm-hmm.
to help bridge that gap, and I've never even been there before. And so this was definitely one of those moments of just fake it until you make it, which I think is probably the best advice in life ever. So I show up with a few people that definitely are kind of the project leaders. We have another person on the phone in Anchorage, which is definitely one of the highest levels of leadership on the project. And then you have me, and I'm sort of the community liaison consultant, basically. And we're presenting to the Northwest Arctic Borough Assembly, which is made up of a member from each of the 11 villages in that region.
Mm.
So this is the Northwest Arctic. And this is also where the Red Dog Mine is, just for people to kind of situate the area that we're talking about. And we're presenting on this project, and the borough is actually a landowner along the route, and so we would definitely need their approval to move forward ultimately. And as everyone is, as our team is presenting, I kept interjecting just because, I kind of have a intuitive sense of if we're getting our point across or not. And if I feel like, the way that we just worded something is really just not the vernacular or the way to phrase it to really
mm-hmm.
get the point across best, then I will jump in typically and kind of like reword it and just, add to what was said.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that a few times, and I'm at this point, like, I think 30 years old or something. This was a while ago. And, like the youngest person on the team by far, and like definitely like the lowest in the food chain in that presentation. And during a break, and I don't really know how I'm coming across to the people, the leadership from that region.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea if they're, I'm totally new to them, and I'm Athabascan from a different part of the state. And as soon as we started a break, two of the borough assembly members like motioned me over to where they were sitting at kind of their like counter, like podium area. And I immediately thought like, oh no, like, I've somehow offended them. I've said something wrong.
Called on the carpet.
Yeah, there used to be like major wars between the Inupiaq and the Athabascans. Maybe I sort of like set that off somehow. Like, I don't know. And so I was just all kinds of nervous. And so I went over to these two gentlemen, and they were a little bit older. And one was Vern Cleveland from Norvik, and then Clyde Ramus from Selawik. And they motioned me over, and I thought I was going to get a scolding. I thought they were just being nice and didn't want to do this in front of everybody, but they needed to correct something that I had done. They motion me over, so I walk over to them, and they say, well, we want to give you a name. And to get a name in a different region of the state is an extremely high honor. And I literally had been in Kotzebue for like 2 hours at this point, I think, and it was my first time ever to in an Inupiaq community. And so I was blown away, and they said, we're sitting here trying to figure out what to name you. And then he said, well, she talks a lot. And I said, yeah, she does. So we decided to name you Uqaqti, which means one who talks, or like a speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And my first question out of my mouth was, is that the same thing as one who needs to be quiet? Like, is this your way of telling me that I'm talking too much? I've never heard that before. Just kidding. And just telling the story, I'm sure I illustrate the point to everybody.
No, that's awesome.
But they said, no, there's a positive connotation to this name. It means like, and actually in the northernmost part of the state, in the village of New Wixit, when I was there, they said it actually translates as like a preacher as well. And so it kind of, I guess, embodies like you're speaking, but you do have a message. You have something meaningful to say as well. And so I loved the name. I thought it was so incredible to be given a name so quickly in this part of the state. And I've now grown to have a lot of dear friends and, just people that I really respect and care about there. And so to get a name there was really significant. And it took me a few years to realize what a perfect name that would be for the business. Because not only does it describe what I do, basically I communicate on behalf of my project. It involves a lot of talking and public speaking and facilitating and all of that. But at the core, it's, really about communication. And so, I mean, in order to build relationships. So it really, it described what I do, but it also was given to me by a different region of the state, which highlights the fact that I'm kind of, I guess, an ambassador building relationships statewide on behalf of my clients.
Yeah, I think
and
that's
on behalf of myself, because I love building relationships. These are at this point, lifelong friends as well. But, if I had an Athabasca name for the company, it would not really convey that relationship building, side of things. And it wouldn't convey either that this is a statewide company that I'm building. And as of today, as of this year, I have completely become statewide with the UNGA project for Heliostar. So, I think the name really embodies all of that, and it's a reflection of who I am, and that, and just the honor of getting a name my first day in Kotzebue in and of itself, I think conveys that even if you're not from that area, like people ask me, if we hire you, but you're not from this region, are you going to be effective? And I guess the name of my business kind of conveys that, yes, I think I will be effective.
I think that's just the coolest story, Joy. I think that's tremendous. So
thank you. I really love it too. And it just makes me really proud, and looking at, the impact of these projects, around the state, I'm someone that, I've built a business that is very visible, and I'm a role model for not only my daughters, but for a lot of, young people around the state. And, without the opportunity that I've been given, and the trust that these projects have put in me, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so I'm extremely grateful, and I'm extremely proud of working on the great projects that I've been able to work on. But this is just another example of, leaving a positive impact for the whole state, really, but, also for business owners. And, of course, hiring locally is the most important thing, but I'm someone that's also has benefited in a really big way.
Yeah, I think this is just a tremendous thing all the way around. From the kind of your impact on the new extractive industry practices, all the way through, like you said, being a role model for young children. Not just your children. Heck, I'm going to point my daughters at you. So you need to watch Joy. I will. I think that's just fantastic. Well, thanks very much for being on the podcast today. And I enjoyed meeting you in Sandpoint and UNGA. And I just was absolutely impressed with your story and with your work. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Matt. And it's definitely been wonderful getting to know you as well. And, I appreciate the great work that you're doing also in helping to bring to light, where we're headed as an industry, and even just, I think resource development projects in general, really the tide is turning and the bar has been raised, and it's, all of our responsibilities to help spread the message and also be a good example for each other. And that's just what we have to do now. And we have to not only hold ourselves accountable, but hold each other accountable. And I've seen so many companies genuinely wanting to do it right that I have no question about the positive future for communities and for resource extraction projects in Alaska and around the world. Of course, I'm a pretty optimistic person, but, I think with people like me and you and Heliostar out there doing really good work and, being really committed to, again, being a great neighbor and leaving positive impacts wherever we can, I think we can definitely help be a part of that change as well. So thank you, Matt, for all you're doing. And I can't wait to continue working with you.
Feelings mutual. Well, look at that. You made it to the end. Thanks very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we're going to have a lot more coming. You need to sign up and become part of the Grove. Give us your email address, and we'll make sure you're notified anytime there's a new podcast coming down the pipe. Have a great day.